Hello everybody, hope you're doing really well. Today I am in Luce, just outside of Maidstone. In fact, it's kind of weird being here because it sort of reminds me of a few old friends that used to be here. And obviously in today's video we're going to be talking about the paranormal story that is associated with Luce and this church, which is All Saints Church. So stay with me, let's go talk about it. Come on. Hello and welcome back. Oh, it's very dark. Let's try and get in some light. There we go. It's strange to me. I've never been to All Saints Church in Luce, and yet I sort of know the area really well. I mean, really, Maidstone's the place that I've probably spent most of definitely my childhood / teenage years in. I have a lot of friends that lived in Maidstone, and it was pretty much my sort of place where I used to spend just pretty much gigging, everything really. I've done everything in Maidstone really. And Luce is kind of nice because I used to know a couple of friends who were sort of pretty much living in Luce at the time, and it's very sort of interesting, Luce, because it's on the outskirts of Maidstone. It's got this really weird sort of dichotomy of it still retains this beautiful ruralness with all these Tudor buildings and these sort of like this surrounding elements of it, but it also retains that sort of like modern sort of suburban element with lots of new builds sort of taking place on it. Anyway, this is a paranormal video after all, and I wanted to talk about the paranormal stories. What I'm going to sort of just say from the outset is that within this story, it revolves around the yew tree, which is the ancient yew, which you can probably see. And within that, the story goes that so it's kind of weird. So it's kind of like there's kind of two stories separated with this, and like I said, it's really trying to find the best sort of amalgam to it. And I've found it really interesting when I was sort of doing my research. The main one is that the church is actually home to two ghosts, that they can only be seen after one has stuck a pin in a yew tree in the courtyard, and then you basically go anti-clockwise around the yew tree about 13 times. Now I've seen another report saying to go around 12 times, mostly at midnight. But there's also a really dark one which was quite sort of interesting to read, which was that apparently and it's dated as being an older story, which is if you run around the yew tree anti-clockwise about 24 times and you stand on the table near the porch looking through the window, you'll see a woman killing a baby. And apparently it's to do with a local resident ghost that was sort of situated in the area, and it sort of seems to sort of create this sort of like dark, macabre sort of like tale towards it. Another one within that is to do with the tradition that if you run around stick a pin in the yew tree and run around it anti-clockwise, and you look in the small tower window above the Charlton Memorial, you'll see a face. And apparently villagers have said that it's the missing fourth face from the top of the pillar that's there. So all in all, it's really interesting how this sort of like it just is a really beautiful sort of like idea about folklore and how our sort of like tales get sort of tangled up and twisted over time, really. The idea that at one point it was 13 times that you run around the tree, at another point you run around it 12, another time you run around it 24, and sometimes you would run around it at midnight, obviously to conjure up these spirits. And it sort of incorporates that really old traditional belief of sort of like these folk tales and these spirits, and because of that I absolutely love it. Now what I'd like to add, and I'm going to show you whilst I'm literally sitting on this bench, funny enough, if I just move some bits. Where we are right on what would be called Mill Pond, I think. Well, it's Mill Pond really. It's basically an amalgam of lots of different little sort of like shallow ponds, and they all sort of eventually link up to the River Medway. You can see if I come around this way, you can see it sort of going off in the distance. There's some ducks here, God bless them. Now, what makes this really fascinating is that, depending on your spiritual belief, of course, but it's very common within paranormal belief that water is a huge conduit for spiritual and paranormal beliefs. There's a few reasons behind that, but I'll give you one of the main hypotheses behind it, which is obviously that water is our lifeblood, really, as human beings, and it's our source in terms of everything we do. We can't live without water, as most of you probably are well educated on. And that they believe that water is a passing, because water is constantly flowing, in spiritual terms, that's right, the birds are agreeing, that it becomes a passing sort of motion, basically, in our spirits, and our bodies transport through that, and that's through different religious beliefs as well. But it's fascinating in this church specifically that the water is pretty much here underneath this church, really, and it's flowing. It almost surrounds it like a moat, really. It's fascinating, and you're not surprised then, in a spiritual context. Let's just open this up for argument's sake, of this church and this whole area actually in Luce being really spiritual. Now, apart from that, in the area, there's not really much else paranormal wise to talk about. There are a couple of mini stories that I've heard, but not enough that I'd warrant them putting on here, really, if that makes sense. Not that they're bad, this one I like because it incorporates folklore and legend into it, and I love it. I mean, Luce is beautiful. It's a shame you can hear the main road from here as well, so it's not exactly the most tranquil of places ever, but it's still fascinating. Yeah, really, really good. Anyway, look, I really hope you enjoyed that brief little paranormal tale associated with the yew tree and the ghosts that are still said to haunt All Saints. Thank you so much for coming along with me, and in the immortal words of Phoenix History, because history matters, in this case it's the paranormal, and I really hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for some more paranormal videos at some point in the future, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care for now, everybody. Ready? Cap out.